What's happening, Mackie?
What's happening, Jay?
Ain't nothing.
All right, y'all. So we record now. All right. So let's go ahead on and get started with the story. All right. Okay. All right. So just like most teenagers, my friends and I were attracted by excitement and hated boredom. In those days, we had to create our own fun. 13 is the age when you naturally want to look your best, but for us, finding money to buy shoes was always a challenge. My parents my parents, wearing the latest gear was not a necessity. My mother would always tell us that a pair of Jeeper sneakers were as just as good as no name brand shoes. No name brand shoes are just as the same as Nike, is essentially what she was saying. Although she was probably right, I didn't know of any teenager who would agree with her. So I found myself always thinking of ways to find funds. All right. So now, because he wants the nice things, he's going to try to find ways to get it. Because remember, his mother, um, she thought that no name brand shoes was just as good as Jordan, but he didn't like that. He didn't like that she felt that way. So now he's going to try to find funds. All right. For a while, I'm sorry, in the neighborhood where there was always an older guy willing to add you to his roster of a junior drug partner. Okay. I would watch as many of my friends took the job. They didn't have to announce their new position. One could tell instantly by the sudden change in their demeanor and in their style. They would go downtown to Sunday on Sundays to shop, picking up the latest Air Jordans. My mother always insisted that clothes don't make a person. Yeah, I think, but they could make a person feel better. That's what he felt. How could I hang around my friends or even talk to a girl without wearing the latest styles? Now, we all know this is how a lot of kids feel at this age, at age of 13. That's how they feel. They feel that the way they dress and the way they look, it helps them to get girls and it helps them to feel better. Okay, this is his story. At first, listen to what he says. He said, at first, I resisted the overtures of the guys who tried to recruit me to sell drugs. I depended on my athletic abilities. He was a good athlete, so he depended on that for a while, which were better than average to keep me popular in the hood and at school. Okay. My friends and I played basketball from early mornings into the night at the school. One guy I used to play with there was called Tink Tink. His father, Frank Melvin, was the guy who taught Reggie Kung Fu. But by then, his father was dead, and all that was a legend. Frank Melvin, who grew up in the Drayton Street projects, had kept many local youngsters off the street in the 1970s with his inspiring Kung Fu classes. It wasn't long before he became a famous casualty. While on patrol in the projects on the night of December 30th, 1981, Frank and a bunch of his newly recruited angels heard a report of a robbery at a nearby bar, the People's Tavern, and raced to investigate. At the tavern, Newark police mistakenly assumed Frank as the robbery suspect and fired on him, killing him almost instantly. I was 8 at the time, and I knew it was a blow for our whole neighborhood. Now, this is important for you guys to remember what took place with Frank Melvin. Okay, he died going to investigate a robbery. Cop mistook him as the suspect and wound up shooting him dead. Okay, so pay attention. The strongest leader we'd ever seen had been cut down abruptly, leaving his wife, 3 sons, and an entire community to mourn his loss. So he was a huge figure in the community, but now he's dead. But I want you guys to pay attention and listen to what happened after he died, because this is very important. Okay. His sons grew up in the Drayton Street projects, and we often crossed paths. Tank had a chubby little brother whom we call Mike. Okay, I want you guys to remember Mike. He was about 7 years younger than me, and we used to spend a lot of time shaking him off so he wouldn't follow us around. So you can imagine, at the time they were kids, they were playing basketball, and then you had Mike. He was a little kid always around, and nobody wanted him around because he was a young kid. Man, you can't play with us, man. You're a little small kid. You ain't doing nothing but getting in the way. So that's the picture here. Okay. I want to also point out to you guys that the reason I'm rushing through this story is because I want to get to the end so we can have conversation, just so you guys know. I just want to point that out to you. Okay. Their home life after Frank's death appeared to be in ruins. Their mother, it was said, couldn't pull her life back together after her husband's death. Her rudderless, fatherless boys had got drawn into the drug culture, and Mike ended up with the longest rap sheet of all. He served time off and on for various assaults and robberies and drug convictions. In December 2005, the front page of the Star Ledger revisited all these people from my neighborhood in a chilling way. The headline screamed that Mike Melvin, age 25, had been charged in a grisly quadruple murder at St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic Church, the same site where his father once taught Kung Fu. So Mike, after losing his father, he went off the rails. Okay. Now he's, at the time, being charged with a quadruple murder. He done killed 4 people. Okay. So we're going to get deeper in the story. You guys just be patient with me. Okay. Investigators pieced together a story about how the 4 victims, all of whom had robbery convictions, died. Listen at how they believe they died. They believed that Mike, already awaiting trial for a previous murder, okay, was a dangerous criminal, and that he was drunk when he walked all 4 victims down the street and put bullets through all of their heads. That's what he's being charged with. Okay. Mind you, this is all after he lost his father. Okay. Seeing Mike's story splashed on the front page was a sad testimony of how the streets had gobbled up another fatherless youngster. There is no doubt in my mind that Mike, who was only 17 months old when he sat on the front row for his dad's funeral, would have turned out differently if his father hadn't been slain. All I know is that Mike was once a sweet kid who could have grown up to be somebody important. He didn't have one mean bone in his body. Mike could have been that beacon of light that his father was to Reggie and that Reggie was to me. Instead, he stands charged with multiple murders at age 25. He seems all but doomed. Okay. Look at how he describes Mike when they grew up as kids. He looked at Mike as a sweet kid that didn't have a bad bone in his body. Okay. But that person who they grew up with as a child is now 25 and being charged with a quadruple murder. Okay. So it's a stark difference how he grew up as a child and what people knew of him. Man, he was a good dude, man, sweet guy, didn't have a harmful bone in his body. Well, now he ruthless. He done killed 4 people, man. Murder, just like that. By the time I hit my teen years, I too knew what it felt like to not have a father. Our household had survived barely an extended period when my father found a girlfriend, and everyone knew it, even my mother. It started with phone calls. The phone would ring at a certain time of the evening, and Pop would race to pick it up on the first ring. It was out of the ordinary for his behavior. We soon suspected something was up. When Pop started disappearing regularly on weekends, he'd leave on Friday nights and walk back in the door on Sunday without much of an explanation. Mom didn't take kindly to this development. We see that, go see that other woman. Go ahead, she would snap at him. I once saw her throw a brick at his car as he drove away. When I was 12, he finally moved out for good to live with his girlfriend, Thelma, whom he married a few years later. So now he moved out, right? He's married to Rutherford Davis. He moves out to go be with Thelma. Okay. So now those kids that he had with his wife, he's abandoning them to go be with the woman that he was cheating with. Okay. Just want to point that out to you guys. So now he done left his wife for Thelma. Although I would miss my father dearly, and his departure would send our household into financial chaos, I breathed a sigh of relief that day. Our house was finally peaceful. For those who don't know, Sam experienced a lot of domestic violence in his home. So that's why he made this statement. Now that his dad is gone, at least the house is peaceful. He said, so even though my father's not in the house, he said, now at least there's some kind of peace, because before there was always chaos. Mom got served with divorce papers a few years later. When the papers arrived, she called her children in for a serious talk. By then, my 3 older siblings had moved out, so it was just the 3 youngest boys, Andre, me, and Colton. Sitting us down in the living room, she let us know that our lives were going to change drastically. Your father and I are getting divorced. That means we don't have his paycheck to rely on, she warned us. But we will survive, and I will make a way. I promise you that. It was a sink or swim moment for moms, and as time went on, I could see her changing and growing. It seemed as if she finally had a mission, and she was determined to fulfill it. She did whatever she could to make ends meet. She signed up for welfare and even scoured the streets for cans and sold them to the scrap man. She is not perfect, but no one is. Perhaps her biggest limitation was that she couldn't read. Her mother died when Mom was a little girl, so she dropped out of elementary school to help her father run his farm. As a result, Mom couldn't read the electric bills, the newspaper, or even the divorce papers when they arrived. After Pop left, I helped Mom with everything from reading letters to paying the bills. When a homework paper had to be signed, I just went ahead and signed Mom's name myself. I'm proud of Moms for finally learning to read at age 60. She was a grandmother by the time. In fact, being a grandmother is what motivated her to do it. Pop stayed in our lives peripherally. After he left, he moved into an apartment about 20 minutes away in Orange, a middle-class area. Andre, Colton, and I saw him occasionally when he would stop by after work. Our conversations were no frills Q&As, often with one-word answers on my part. How are things? Good. How was your day? I was tempted to reply, man, Pops, my day was awful. My life is pretty bad. But there was no need to bother him with this. Really, what could he have done to change my situation? In order for him to help me, he would have had to step up and help improve my life. And he hadn't done so up to that point. Now he was out of the house and it didn't seem as if anything good could come out of talking about the divorce and its aftermath. Mom and Pops snipped about each other to us kids in a competition to destroy our respect for the other parent. Y'all listen at this. This is important. He says, this is what his mom would say. He ran out on you guys, Mom complained. Pop would say things like, man, you know your mama crazy. It it seemed wrong when they carried on like that. I didn't like it. But with Pops having relocated to a more well-to-do community, leaving us still stranded on Ludlow Street, I tended to side with my mom's point of view. So what I want to point out in this part of the story is that when the mom parted ways, they would criticize the other parent to the kids. Okay. They would say, yeah, you know, your daddy ain't nothing. He left y'all. And the daddy would say, man, you know, I love your mama because your mama crazy. Okay. But Sam is saying in this story, in this paragraph here, that he tended to side with his mom because what he saw was his daddy left his home to go be to go be in another part of town that was much better than the town he came from. Okay. So he upgraded his lifestyle. So that he tended to believe his mother rather than his father. His daddy didn't go down, his daddy went up. So he tended to believe his mom's story. Okay. Just want to point that out to you guys. Pops continued to pay the mortgage, but there were plenty of other expenses. At the time, the electricity and phone would get cut off. I've seen my mother beg the public work guy to leave our lights on because she needed a few more days to scrap up a payment. Sometimes he would comply, but other times he had no choice but to cut us off. We didn't have a working boiler, so we would huddle around the fireplace for warmth and use space heaters in the bathrooms. As a kid, I thought it was normal for moms to grab an axe and head outside to chop up the firewood. When Pop left, so did the car, which meant that to get to school, I had to walk 10 minutes to the bus stop, catch the number 24 bus, ride 6 miles to downtown Newark, and then transfer to the number 13 bus. Without a car, we would go grocery shopping and then borrow a shopping cart to transport our food back to the house. We went from quality meats to budget meals, from steaks to bologna. My father had extricated himself from our household during a critical time in my development. During the divorce, Colton is his other brother, Colton cried through the whole court proceeding. He was 8 at the time, and I could see the change in him instantly. His grades began to sink, and my mother got summons to school regularly about Colton's behavior and academic problems. She had so much going on. Listen to this, what I'm getting ready to tell you. She had so much going on that she depended on Colton to resolve his own issues. But he was just a child and never truly recovered from the divorce. So mom, man, she had so much going on. She was like, man, y'all got to take care of yourself. I just don't have the capacity. You know, I got so many kids. I got so much going on. Your father left. I'm trying to figure this thing out because remember when they was together, she didn't work. She was a stay-at-home mom. So now she got to scramble, man. And Colton, he's struggling with the divorce. He's like, man, my daddy ain't here. And man, I'm struggling. Well, guess what? Mom's struggling too. So mom said, I can't help you. So these are two people that can't help one another. The only difference is Colton is a child and he's dealing with this. Okay. It's only fair to say that Pops came through whenever I asked for help. He certainly helped pull me through my college woes when I was having the worst luck with cars. I had been the embodiment of cool in high school when I put together enough money to buy my first car I used a used but fashionable Audi 5000. So you wind up buying an Audi, a used Audi. But it was a lemon, and it does nothing for your image when you have to hop out of the car and push it to the side of the road. So I sold the Audi and brought another car, which my sister Felice promptly wrecked. So his sister wrecked the car. But here's what Pop did. Pop stepped in at that point and gave me $2,000 to help me get back on the road. Okay, so Pop helped him get back on the road. But I reliably sent my father birthday and Father's Day cards, and I always took the time to fill them with long handwritten notes. Listen at this. My stepmother, Thelma, saved the cards faithfully and recently shared them with me. Seeing them reminded me how hard I had tried to connect with my father in a way that he could accept. I wanted to let him know I yearned for a deeper relationship, although I didn't know how to ask for it. Now, the reason I pointed Thelma out to you is because Thelma, as a stepmother, is totally different from George's stepmother. Right? George's stepmother didn't want nothing to do with him. She would treat him bad when he came to the house. But Thelma, even though she wasn't his biological mother, she treated him with grace. She kept all of the cards that he sent to the house, and she showed him love. So I just wanted to point out that difference between Sam's story and George's story. Okay. Without a father's full-time presence to rein me in during high school, I was running the streets and coming home whenever I wanted. Moms often told me to go to school, go to school, go to school. And although I wonder why she would always say it 3 times, I did what she demanded, keeping a high grade point average in high school. There I spent most of my days with George and Remek. George and Remek are the other 2 doctors. Since we took most of our classes together, it felt natural for us to form a team. The 3 of us had a lot of things in common. We got good grades and loved having fun. Back then, it was extremely important for me to be a part of my peer group, and most of my neighborhood friends were using drugs and alcohol by high school. Many of my boys respected the fact that I had taken so long. Many of my boys respected the fact that I had long taken a strong stance against drugs, so they didn't push me about it. But I found that the older I got, the more the expectations escalated. All the time, every day, there were decisions I faced as guys offered me opportunities to make some money by taking part in the drug operation. Check this out. Occasionally during high school, I took part. So now he getting into the drug game. Okay, but look at how subtle it happened. Okay, because before he had a strong stance against it, but now he's starting to slip. Okay. Listen to what he says. Poverty makes people resort to illegal tactics just to survive. And now, with my father out of the house, I didn't want to be an added burden to my mom. So, what is he saying his motivation is? He's saying his motivation is, man, I didn't want my mama to struggle. So, yeah, I went, did a little drug so I can help my mom out. My dad is not here. That's his rationale. Okay. It was tough enough for her. The monthly 400 welfare check didn't go very far. Some can't even imagine how tough it is to have no money in your pocket, an empty belly, and no way to satisfy your hunger. In the summer between my junior and senior year of high school, I was hanging out with some guys and came up with this not so bright idea of robbing drug dealers to make some quick money. We preyed on young drug salesmen, pulling a gun on them, snatching their money, and driving off. The plan worked rigorously well for a while, but one day we were in the middle of jacking some dope boys nearby when a Monte Carlo pulled up and two plainclothes policemen jumped out. I knew my best bet was to act like I was a bystander. So I coolly started walking away from the scene and tried to calm my heart when one of the boys sprinted past me with police in hot pursuit. Each step he took, it seemed a cop took two. Their foot race ended a few yards away from me. As I saw the police wrestle him to the ground, my face mirrored as fear took over. I prayed he wouldn't gesture towards me, letting the police know I was involved. Snitching was frowned on, and I depended on our street credo at this moment. I managed to walk the rest of the sharp block while maintaining my composure. But as soon as I hit the corner, I took off running. That's what he's saying. When the next day dawned, I called the police department and learned that my friends who did get arrested had already given my name. You need to bring yourself in for questioning or we will come get you, the police officer bluntly told me over the phone. Felice drove me to the police precinct in Montclair, where the two of us were ushered into an interrogation room. The detective sat me down in the seat across from him. He insisted on calling me by my middle name, Marshall, which was the name I was known by in the neighborhood. Someone had definitely talked, I realized. I sat back as the detective described every detail of our crime. I was caught. After the questioning, shackles and handcuffs were placed on my ankles and wrists. All right, so what I want to do right now is just pause. That's a good pausing point for us. I do have more to read, so I just want to just do a temperature check real quick on how you guys feeling with the story that I've read thus far. Anybody want to chime in? Is anybody feeling what I'm talking about in this story? Did you experience it? Did someone you know experience this? Anybody? Anybody want to chime in?
Man, I love the story, man. Um, what I will say is the Mike, the character of the individual of Mike. You know, you said he didn't have a bad bone in his body, but everyone has a bad bone in his body if they answer that call to do wrong. You know, it's up to you to say, well, no, I'm not going to do wrong. But we all have the potential. So, in my opinion, that kid, you know, his life would have been different had his father not been killed. And then where we are now and what's going on in the community, you know, kids, like you say, kids want more, you know, you know, a lot of them, they want the Jordans, they want all the good stuff. But, you know, the one thing they have to have is someone telling them that you have to work hard. Because the mother said, go to school 3 times. So, you know, I'm going to use that in my class. But anyway, man, I like it. I'm sorry for being late.
No, thank you, Brother Charles. I appreciate you being on the call, man. Anyone else, real brief, and I'm going to get started reading again. I don't have that many more pages to read. I just look, I have 1, 2, 3. I got 3 more pages to read, and we can have a good discussion about everything that you guys have heard thus far. So if anybody else want to chime in, I'll be glad to listen to you guys. We just got to be real brief. Anybody else?
I just want to say, like, listening to this story, a lot of kids, you know, they feel like I have no other option but to turn to the streets to be able to provide for myself, you know. And it's sad, like this group, what you're doing, we need to look at, you know, the community and see how can we help these young guys out so they won't turn like this guy did, you know, to the streets to get the basic necessities. You know what I'm saying? Like, I appreciate like the story and then what you're doing. It all connects. You know, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Sherman. Yeah, that means a lot. And yeah, like we talked about on the call yesterday, man, the possibilities are endless. What we're doing with this organization, you know, just the fact that we have the strong Black positive, smart, wise men that we have on these calls. It lets you know the value that we have with this organization. So, yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, man. You're right. We do have to make sure that we engage in our community to put an end to some of the stuff that we're seeing in our society. All right. So I'm getting ready to continue reading. All right, let's go. I'm almost done. I was stunned to see a lot of guys walking around seeming comfortable after being there. He's talking about in jail. I couldn't understand that. I met one guy who had been incarcerated 3 times previously for armed robbery and was familiar with the legal system. When I told him the charges against me, he said he was sure I was going to get off. About a week later, I saw the same guy beaten so badly that he had to be rushed to the hospital. The dude nicknamed Trouble had walked up to him and without a warning punched him in the face. Trouble was known for knocking people out at the facility. He would wait until you weren't looking and blindside you with a punch to the jaw. I wanted to go home so badly. 4 long weeks would go by before that became a possibility. My father visited every day and assured me that everything would be all right. Pop made sure I had a lawyer who worked hard to get the charges against me reduced. We decided that I would plea bargain in hopes of erasing the threat of jail sentence. I felt like I fully had my father's attention. During his visits, Pop attempted to reach out to me in his own way. How are they treating you? He would ask. Hang in there. I stood motionless during his visits. None of it mattered because at the end of the visits, I had to return to my miserable room. None of it mattered because so much had happened between the divorce and now. What could he say that would help me? He had ample opportunity to say it for years. His concern seemed to come too late. After all, by not investing in my life, he had unintentionally assisted in steering me to this outcome. Occasionally, prosecutors wanted to charge me as an adult, and if I had accepted the first plea bargain offered, I would have faced 10 to 25 years in prison. But my lawyer managed to make sure I was charged as a juvenile. When I walk into the courtroom to enter my plea, I look behind me to see my mother and father standing there firmly in support of me. The judge suspended my sentence and gave me 2 years probation. I was free to go. It's very, very powerful because, man, he was looking at 10 to 25 years, and because of his lawyer, he was able to get him charged as a juvenile and go away with probation. So he was saved by the bell right there. I felt as if I was on my own to make it to manhood, and I was set up to fall because I didn't know what I was doing. After my time in the lockup, I suddenly realized that those stumbles were the magic events that prompted my parents finally to look up and give me their full attention. I want y'all to listen to this. This is good here. Whenever I got sick or in trouble, that would bring them running to my side. But this kind of stepping in after the fact couldn't possibly produce the best results. Here it is. In fact, I think it can even cause some kids to decide that if acting up is the only way to get my parents' attention, then that is what I'll do. That's important because what he's saying here is that he did some stuff just to get his parents' attention. So he was acting crazy, doing all kind of crazy stuff because what he noticed is that when he got in trouble, when he hurt himself, that's when he got his mother and his father's attention. And he noticed that. So now he's saying, man, okay, well, I know what I got to do to get my kids, my parents' attention. I just got to act ignorant. I wonder if they got other kids that feel that same way. I know I felt this way, talking about to get his parents' attention, he would act up. He said, I know I felt that way. I sometimes did wrong on purpose just because I knew my parents tended to react. rather than take action, ahead of the time. I'm sure my father noticed my personality abruptly change in high school, but he never said a word, only offered the same mundane questions as always. I've had to learn much of what I know about being a man through trial and error. I'm still struggling to learn how to express my emotions with women. Really, how would I know anything about that? I never saw my mom. I never saw my dad open up. All I had to go on was the input that friends offered on how to treat women. I had to be deprogrammed. Okay. Check this out. Listen to what I'm getting ready to tell you now. As a child, there was no place I could turn to see a healthy example of how a man and a woman related to each other, except if you wanted to count the fantasy of the TV world. I had to figure it out by myself. For those who weren't on the call, he learned a lot about marriage through watching the Cosby Show. And that's what he's talking about right here. So he never physically saw a husband and a wife interact with one another so he can know how to act as a man that's trying to engage a woman. But he saw the relationship between the Huxtables, and that kind of gave him some sort of a gauge for those who weren't on the call last week. Okay. My parents' battles affected me for a long time. I'd get in an argument and immediately be ready to fight because I thought that was how you handle it. One of the questions the dean asked me, because he wound up getting put out of school, so obviously, I'm skipping in the book just to give you guys the most important information so that I can get through it. So just to give you a little background, he was put out of school, and this is what the dean asked him. The dean said, "You got to put out of school for fighting," by the way. The dean asked him, one of the questions the dean asked me was, "How could you have avoided the fight?" I answered truthfully, "I don't know." "Did you ever think of simply being the one to walk away rather than add fuel to the fire?" he asked. It was a light bulb moment for me. Walking away hadn't even entered my mind. Even though Reggie had preached the same message much earlier, I had forgotten the lesson. I had been conditioned to think that if someone disrespects you, then you must make them pay. That was his mindset. This school official had no idea of what my life had been like, but he helped me reclaim those old memories when Reggie had taught that it's always possible to resolve an argument without fighting. Kids naturally imitate their parents, but when they don't get any direction at home, it sends them into the streets to discover how to act. It's who you bump into while you're out there that changes your path for better or for worse. So what he's saying is who you bump into in life will change you for better or worse, meaning your friends, meaning the people you entertain, meaning the people you engage with on an everyday basis. That will determine the trajectory of your life, right? We talked about that on the call a few weeks ago. It is a dad's job, but in so many homes, fathers fail to perform it. For some reason, many of them don't realize how important they are. A simple conversation signals to a child that you're important to me. Other people can say that to you all day long, but if a father hasn't done it, then you're missing something. Sometimes when men reach the age of fatherhood, they forget how it feels to be a child who was hungry for their dad's attention, and the cycle repeats itself. I don't mean to come down harshly on my parents, and I don't think of their style of child rearing as a failure. I just don't think they knew any better. They did the best they could. A big piece of me is satisfied that I made it past my obstacles, but I can't help but dream about how my success would have been even more undeniable if I had my father by my side. And because the problem of absent fathers has become so common, it's also become widely accepted. And it shouldn't be. Children are precious, and you can't turn them loose on the streets and hope they turn out okay. Kids need someone to speak for them. After my father left, there were times when he seemed to show that he was sorry for picking me up and taking me out for a bite to eat. Those moments reinvigorated me and let me hope that maybe we could have a bond. But they were few. There was a part of me that will always be missing, a part that is uncompensated by everything else I do in life. It is a sentence that begins and has no end. I was always a curious kid and demanded to know things, but these are some questions that don't have answers. My sentence will always be a fragment. Only one person could have completed it, and now it's too late. All right, that's the story. It's the story of Sam and his relationship with his father. Okay. So the good thing is that we finished with enough time in order to have good discussion about this story. I would love to hear what you guys thought about this story. Does it touch home for you? Can you relate? Do you know someone who perhaps have been through this situation with their father? Or someone who may be going through this type of situation right now?
Somebody in my class at my school, his name is Jesse. He lost his parents, and his grandmother and his baby brother in a car accident, and his family drowned in a lake, and everybody died in the car. So that was one of the people that I know where his family died. So yeah.
Hmm. Horrible story. Thank you, Ava. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Love to
Um,
hear.
I think the story was actually pretty good because well, I honestly liked it because the way how you read it and stuff, explained it for us, I like if I think it's pretty good.
Thank you, Taryn. Taryn, is there any part of the story that grabbed your attention?
Um, the part when you told us that he was going to be sentenced to jail for 25 years and his lawyer got him out.
Yeah, that saved him because had he done that amount of time in prison, he wouldn't be the doctor that he is today. You know, he was faced with 25 years. And apparently, he had a good lawyer because his lawyer was able to get him treated as a juvenile as opposed to an adult, which allowed him to walk away with probation. So obviously, that was a good thing for him. Okay. Anyone
Good
else?
morning. Good morning. I think speaking to what Tyron just mentioned about him having a good lawyer, I think it's important that our youth are aware of, what's changing right now in Louisiana specifically about, our government is doing everything in their strength to charge our youth who do commit crimes as adults. Their intention is to destroy your life, even when you make, you know, mistakes like he did as a young child. And, not everybody has the resources to be able to afford an attorney that would go above and beyond to fight for you to even have a chance. And so there's so much in this story. That's one aspect. the young boy, Mike, we all can agree that had his dad not been killed due to, the cops wrongfully identifying him, that his life would have been drastically different. The community would have been different. So you have that aspect of the story as well. And then the other point that stood out to me is he mentioned that, he knows how to handle conflict by what he saw in the house. And so the impact that we have on our children is huge. How we handle conflict, how we handle disagreements, how we show affection, how we show, you know, that love is an action word. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah,
There's
that's good, Anita.
there's so much in this particular story that I can relate to, and there's so much that I understand. And so I'm going to start with what the young lady just finished saying. Um, that is very, very true. The way that and it's nothing new, but it's more intense now, of destroying young folks' lives before they even get a chance to live it, and understanding rights. Young men don't understand, when the police stop them, they don't have to say anything. They don't understand that they have the right to remain silent. Most parents don't understand that the police can't question your children, unless you're present. And children don't have to, even in a robbery, if they're underage, they have to have an adult present, even to be questioned. They don't have to be separated from their parents. They can act for their parents, because they don't understand their rights. Um, just shortly with that, but what I saw in that story was a lot of unintended consequences and trauma. Um, the fact that the mentor did was killed like that, um, and how the community dealt with it, the things they saw within their community, and how it affected them mentally. Yeah, but I also saw the unintended consequences of adults not being able to get it right. And when we don't get it right, our children definitely pay the price. And but I saw something about the father that I want us to be mindful of. Even though we're talking about fatherless, he wasn't a great communicator. The father wasn't, but he did some things that said that he cared. In that story, he talked about his father paying the mortgage even though he was gone. You know, uh, when my dad left, there was nothing. There was promise of business, but he didn't show up. And I didn't have the ability to call him to even ask for money. So I don't know what happened with their marriage, and I know we're getting it through the writer's view. But if you really pay attention, divorce is a part of life, unfortunately, and children pay the ultimate price. And though he wasn't a great communicator, he was there. He paid for the attorney. There are certain things we have to look at. But I would say the influence of our community, being a product of our community, because I sold the dope. My friends, the one pact that we had, that we wouldn't rob anybody and we wouldn't do dope. And we held each other accountable, for going to school. We would rag on each other, if you didn't go to school and if you did get bad grades. And that was our way of holding each other accountable. And so when I think it's important that we find friends, even if we don't have, our parents don't get it right, whether it's teachers, that we embrace what we do have. Life is not going to be perfect, and it's definitely not going to be fair. And even our parents are not going to be perfect. You know, um, but we definitely have to find a way, whether it's through our peers, being with the few friends that are doing the right thing, or somebody in school. God always sends somebody with a positive influence, and we have to stand on those shoulders and embrace it. I wish I had taken notes because there's so much in the story. It's so many life lessons, even the lesson of forgiveness. He saw his dad and thought it was too late. And there's some things you learn when you get older. You know, uh, Again, I just noticed his dad wasn't a great communicator, but his actions said that he cared. Um, his mom struggled, and for whatever reason that they got that divorce, we put so much on our children. They endure so much because of our choices. And so I just want to encourage the youth that are here, even though whether you have a dad, around at all, because a lot of times when some dads leave, they don't show up at all. You know, um, Find a way to keep a positive outlook, and it's true. When I decided to sell dope, it wasn't because I wanted to, but I actually didn't have a choice until I got a little older and I got a chance to get a summer job, and that was roofing. Hard work, but I got a chance to buy shoes. Yeah, when you're young, clothes and all that those things are important. You know, um, but try to find other options, which sometimes is very, very hard. But all it takes is one time, to get caught up in the system, and it'll affect you for the rest of your life, and it won't let you forget it. It'll follow you throughout your adulthood. I don't know about Louisiana, but in Florida, when you get in trouble as a youth, it's not supposed to count towards you when you become an adult. But in Florida, if the feds pick you up, the feds can go back and use your youth, the trouble you got in as a young person, to sentence you with more time to say that you have been in bad all of your life. And we know that's not the truth. Whatever mistakes you make in life, it doesn't determine the rest of your life. You know, um, Again, I love the story. It was surreal for me because it took me back to a lot of my childhood, and my friends, and the mistakes as well as the accountability. And even took me back to my relationship with my dad. Again, I wish I had some of the things he had because my dad, I couldn't have got money for a car. I couldn't even get money for shoes, or clothes or a haircut. Not even I remember not even getting money for my prom, and having to hustle. You know, or try to find a job somewhere to do if it was just picking up someone on a construction site or whatever. So, um, man, it's just so much. I'm gonna start getting my pencil and paper, but I want to also talk about trauma. The trauma of him seeing his parents fight. That's definitely trauma. The trauma of knowing that somebody that you knew, that was a mentor in the community, died. That's trauma. The things that they witnessed, being robbed and seeing somebody robbed can give you trauma. And trauma is simply when you see something in life that affects you to the point to where you see it when you sleep. You think about it. When you walk outside, you're almost afraid that the same thing is going to happen to you. And a lot of times we don't know what is labeled, we don't give attention to it, but that's a form of PTSD, and our children have that within the communities when they see shootings, when they see fights that are just vicious fights, it leaves them with a traumatic state of mind, and so sometimes they make decisions based on trauma. It's not that I'm a bad kid, but I just don't want to go out like that. And walking away is a tool, but once even if it's not you directly, that trauma untreated leaves a lifelong effect on you. So that's it, fellas. I wish we had more time, but that was a lot in that story uh, that's relatable and realistic um, to date. And so I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the comments from the youth.
Yeah, Mackie, thank you so much for what you shared, that was real good what you shared. And you're right, there's a lot to unpack in this story. And this is a real story. This is not made up. This is Sam's experience growing up. And this story talks about why he did some of the things he did. Sam wasn't a bad kid. He was smart in school. He was an athlete. But what he realized is that his mother was struggling. And in addition to his mother struggling, there were also some things that he wanted and needed, right? Such as the Air Jordans. He wanted to look good. He wanted to look cool because he was at that phase in life where he was starting to be interested in girls. So he got into drugs. And then later on got into robbing drug dealers, right? And it almost cost him 25 years of his life, 10 to 25 years of his life. But he was able to get off from that charge as a juvenile, which is good. Wound up with 2 years probation. He's a doctor today. He's a doctor today. So that is the highlight in the story. I don't want you kids to get caught up on the fact that there was domestic violence. I don't want you guys to get caught up on the fact that the mother and the father wind up eventually getting divorced. That's not the highlight. The highlight is that despite all of those things, he's a doctor today. He was able to overcome the odds and the obstacles and be a successful member of society. That is the highlight. Anybody else would like to share their thoughts on the call about what we read in the story, about what Brother Mackey said? Brother Mackey said a whole lot. Anybody else? I would love to hear from you.
What's going on,
Well,
family?
my
Hey,
chime
yeah,
in. Oh, go
yeah.
ahead,
Go
my
ahead, brother. I'm
man.
sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You
All
got it.
right, all right. I'm gonna be brief, man. But I want to touch on two of the things I heard. First, the very fact that the street life is something that most of us interact with growing up with our fathers for sure. You can't get around it. I've seen at least two of my childhood friends or companions killed as a result of and while they were children, teenagers or whatever, as a result of street life that kind of deterred me from continuing on that path because like whether it's the girls or the extra money you want so you could be fly, so you could have the fresh shoes on and all that stuff, is very attractive for those things because you see a lot of older guys in your same neighborhood in their early 20s or whatever. They have cars, they have things like that, and you want those things for yourself. And it's not many opportunities in destitute areas to get those things outside of participating in that kind of life. So I'm glad he did touch on that. Um, and his deterrent came as him facing that sentence of 28 years that he fortunately was acquitted of, or for forgiven for and able to adjust himself. But some of us do have near death experiences, or even if they're vicariously, like I said for myself personally, that deter us away from that lifestyle and put us on the straight path when we don't have fathers. But I think all of us flirt with it at some point. Also, the last week that I ended up missing. Apologize for that. But talking about the whole Claire Huxtable and Cliff Huxtable thing, a lot of us that didn't have a proper family environment growing up, that and many other sitcoms were our introduction to what a family should look like and how it should function. And that's why I feel like I try to do my best in my own life, but also, for my brothers around me that do have children as well, to encourage them to, stay in their household and, get a woman that can be in harmony with you and facilitate what the household is supposed to look like Nietzsche was talking about, not only just the good times, but how do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with the bad times? How do you deal with disorganization? How do you deal with times where nobody wants to communicate? The children seeing these things is what's going to propel them into knowing what's proper and what's improper and protect them in the future when they go out and facilitate their own household. When you really think about it, it's just based on what kind of household you really think is proper. Because all of us have an idea, even if it's not the nuclear family, being the man, woman, and child. Even if that's not your proper household, it's something in your head that is what a proper household should look like. And I think you modeling that in front of the children is very important, so that they don't go too far away from that.
Yeah, that was good, Larry. That was good. Brother Charles, you wanted to chime in?
Well, first of all, I want to say you're doing a great job in raising two good leaders. So, your baby girl, your son sounds strong, and your baby girl, but they sound like great leaders. And so my thing is, universally, we deal with this in our community, in the Black community. And, as I teach, when I started teaching 25 years ago, when I was walking down that hall coming from my life, I didn't think that I could work for that type of money. And so, I'm amazed at, all the different stories. I know it's out there, but I'm just amazed at the story and how it touches all of us. If you listen, the guys who are on the call, they understand how it's affecting them. How we all can relate to this story. Now, the crimes may be different, but we all fell into I'm gonna say a rut for a little while. In my father's situation, I feel like the first man that spoke, my brother that spoke. What's your name, my man?
Is that Larry or is that Mackie or which one?
Mackie.
Mackie.
And
Okay.
and so my father was kind of like, as I got older, my relationship was better with my father. But when I was young, I was kind of like Mackie. I couldn't call on my father for things. But I also had other individuals, my basketball coach, wrestling coach, because I was a good athlete. So they looked out, and that made the difference. But I just think that modeling the behavior is key. Being in the schools and talking to the kids, and your children being leaders, and they gonna lead from this. And man, look, I'm enjoying it. So let's get on back to the story, brother.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. I
All right.
appreciate that, man. I appreciate you saying that. And you know, one of the things I want to help everybody be mindful of is that what we're talking about is especially important with young boys. You know, girls, yeah, girls get into some stuff. But man, these young boys without direction is dangerous. These kids nowadays, man, they got big guns, you know. And guess what?
Huge, not big, huge.
Yeah, huge guns, huge guns. And then and in addition to that, in addition to the huge guns, they have a mindset that is reckless. And they need guidance and they need direction, man. They need it. They're hungry for it. They want it. We heard in Sam's story, that when Mike lost his father, he went off the rails, man. Went off the rails. And Mike, who was once a sweet boy, as he described his friend, wind up being charged with a quadruple murder. Okay. And what we can't forget is that he was already being accused of a previous murder. So that's 5 people Mike had and took out. Okay. All because after he lost his father, his life went off the rails. He didn't have another male figure to look to for guidance and also to say, hey, boy, you better get your butt over here. Or, hey, I tell you what, if I see you doing that one more time, it ain't going to be good for you. He didn't have that. And that's the presence that a real man brings to the household that get these kids butt in line. Because what we also talked about in Sam's story is that his father didn't discipline him a whole lot, but he had a presence about him that made his kids get in line. All he had to do is put that eye on you and you got your butt together. He talked about that in his story. So that lets you know that just the presence of a father makes a difference. You know, we talked about that. I want to say on yesterday's call, I believe somebody on the call mentioned that. I don't know who it was, but what was brought up is that the presence of a father, just the presence of a father, makes a difference, especially when he has a moral compass that he's trying to get his kids to follow. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. Anybody else?
I just want and just reiterate what you're saying. Like it does make a big difference. Speaking from personal experience, like me and my two brothers, we all had different dads, right? So uh the younger brother right underneath me, his dad passed away when he was a couple of months. Just never really met his dad, and then my dad was always there. I was always going back and forth, he was always there. Even when mama couldn't take care of all three of us, I went still with my dad and my grandmother. So he was always in my life, always was there. And my younger brother, his dad was never there. Never did anything for him. It was just my mom, And he turned to the one that's right underneath me, couldn't get some things my mom couldn't afford. He was out there stealing, doing drugs, I tried my best to talk and guide him the other way and say, okay, look at me. I went to the military. Look at me. This is what I'm doing. You could do other things. And it just went the other way because of the presence of the father wasn't there. Like, I'm his brother. I can't be your father, in both instances. And right now, both of them in jail, you know?
Mm,
So it's like, yeah. So the presence makes a big difference, big difference.
man, that's good. That's good. That's good, Sherman. Man, that's so sorry to hear, man. Both of your younger brothers are in prison like that, man. Wow. All right. Anybody else? I would love to hear from you. Anybody else want to share their thoughts on
I'd
what?
like to share,
Okay.
to piggyback off of what Sherman said. As a woman and as a mom, I can't help but think that perhaps, and I don't know if this happens or not, so men, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But when there is separation between mother and father, when there are children involved, who is in the father's ear to encourage him to go see about your children?
That was a question.
I think personally, I think it's what we see, what has been done to us. So, what I'm saying? There's no guide to parenthood, right? So you either do something different that was done to you, or do the same thing that was done to you, follow in the track, So if you feel like you was done wrong as a child and your dad wasn't there and you thought it was right, you do it. But if you felt bad about, like, man, my dad should have been here, then you're gonna be in your kid's life regardless of the dynamic between the mom and the dad. You're gonna be there for your kids regardless. So it's a it's more the person themselves, if they really want to be there.
Hmm.
That's absolutely uh, correct. When you, I talked about unintended consequences earlier,
Hmm.
and the thing about broken relationships, marriages, um, the first thing we do lean on is what we've seen, and what we've been exposed to. If we hadn't been um, educated in that area, um, but it's both parents' responsibility to, in spite of their failures within that relationship, to have a sense of communication, uh, to foster a positive front with the children. If you're going to separate, the first thing that should happen with the parents that they get on one accord and say, despite our differences, we have these babies or these children, or and they have to be willing to sit down and have a conversation with those children in the ideal world, together, and not rag on each other. Oh, it's your mama fault. Oh, it's your daddy fault. How about sitting down and say, we failed you, but we want you to know that this is not your fault, because the first thing that children think when parents don't make it, and there's a lot of fighting, that I caused it. It's some when you got two parents coming to you, and talking about each other, and they're coming to you as though you're the adult and telling you things that you really shouldn't be privileged to. That child is going to think, I can't fix it. What did I do to cause this? So it's important that, though we can't make it together in this relationship, that they are attentive to one another. Not saying, well, since you're not with me, you can't see the children, and not saying because I drop you, I'm dropping the kids too. And a lot of time that's something that happens. And when that happens, unattended or intended, the children are going to pay the price. It's bad enough to not have their parents in the same household, but if they can't communicate and put up a front, united front in front of the children, that, hey, we love you guys, and though we're not going to be together, we don't hate each other. We just can't be together, and we can't. You're too young to understand it right now, but just know that we're both going to support you. You know, and when I heard the story of both of them being there in the courtroom, just think of the impact that have on them, because people have to choose between keeping the lights on and coming to a school program to support the children, much less going to a courthouse, going to sit down with an attorney, paying money they don't have. And so if we don't sit down and have a conversation with our children when the relationship or the marriage doesn't work, then they're going to get that attention other ways, just like this young man did. But to know that though we didn't make it together, we're going to raise you. We're going to co-parent together, and we're going to be on one accord. That communication is key with each other and with the children. And a lot of times when people separate, they're not thinking about the children. They're thinking about the pain or the failure of the relationship, the thing that I can't stand him and he can't stand me and I can't stand her. But we need to consider that the children didn't ask to be here. And we have to have the mindset that we have to be able to get along to raise them. You know, and that's a hard thing to do. Again, when you hadn't seen it or no one is willing to talk about it. Everybody's trying to win, you know, but the children are losing.
Mackie, that's a great, great perspective. And as what was already shared on the call, what I think about is capacity to do exactly what you're talking about. In my view, the reason why these calls are so good and so important and so helpful to people is that it helped people to build their capacity for one another. So what I mean by that in the context that you just shared, a lot of people are so broken, man. They're so hurt. They don't have the capacity to do what you just described, and that's what Sam's mother experienced. She was like, when Colton was crying, he was devastated, man. After his father died, he saw his dad. I forgot how old he was. I think he was like 6 years old or something like that when he saw his dad in the casket. I'm sorry. When he was in the courtroom, when he was getting divorced, he said he cried all through the whole divorce proceeding. He cried. But his mother told him, man, I can't help you. I'm hurting myself. So you're going to have to deal with that on your own, because you got that going on, but I got a lot of things going on as well. So at that point, Mackie, man, she didn't even have the capacity to help her own son at that time, who was distraught about the divorce. She didn't have the capacity. So what you just said, man, is 100% accurate, Mackie. But man, we have to heal the hurt and the pain that people are going through every day, man, in order to give them the capacity to be able to co-parent and say, you know what, although we have differences, we're going to come together for our kids. But a lot of people are broken and they can't do that.
I think as I described that, mine wasn't either. But part of that is I'm not gonna say and understand when I say that they don't have the capacity. We just hadn't been exposed to it because we can't. Who I don't think anybody on this call in our community um, has ever had therapy. For Black families, we usually take our therapy to church. Okay, we turn to God. We turn to pastors who are untrained that don't understand what it is either. So the term I would use is exposure. Um, and the only reason I know about it because I was exposed to it. I'm a forensic social worker, but before I became a forensic social worker, I worked with families. I worked in other areas of social work itself. So I understand the therapeutic process. Before then, one of the things that I was advised to do when I got into this field is go and get it myself. So I know what it looks like, what it feels like. And the first time I went and I talked to somebody about my childhood, my mother, who's mentally ill, been mentally ill since I was 5. And I've been taking care of her since I was uh, 17. And then my dad, who left me over a woman house when I was 12, because his wife said I couldn't stay there, and never came back to get me, and I think of all the things that I did that I was exposed to. That's why I say this story for me is surreal because I stayed with that woman a month, then I had to hit the street. And when I hit the street, I got to do what I got to do to live. I did things that I regretted doing, but I wasn't a bad kid. It's just that self-preservation is always number one. Before you starve, you're going to steal. You're gonna do what you got to do. So as I began to talk to this therapist for the first time about how I grew up, I realized for the first time, man, I'm messed up, and I didn't say it in those words, and I'm crying down, you know. But at the same time, I realized that was my reality, and so I began to understand the importance of exposure to things like that, and resources and exposure. Yeah, because no one's going to naturally want to go share your innermost hurts with a stranger, much less with somebody trying to charge you for it. We don't know about pro bono services. We don't know about services that allow you to pay according to your income. We don't even know anything about therapy because we're not exposed to it. Not Black folk. We always have to pick up the pieces the best way we can and move forward. And even then, we're still moving forward broken. And so when we are in a setting like this, and I can expose someone to it. I can talk about it. What I do now, I do capital murder cases for the feds. Before I did that, I did capital murder cases for the state of Mississippi. And my job was these young men or people, old men, it don't matter. If you were looking at the death penalty, my job was to go in and tell your life story. And I would have to go 2 generations back to come forward to find out where you got off track to try to present to a jury to keep them from killing you. Okay. So it's called mitigation. It's forensic social work. So as I'm looking at these stories, I talking to these people and I'm going back and doing their biopsychosocial and their genealogy. I'm looking at where I could have been. And I'm looking at all these broken people who wasn't exposed to different services that could have made a difference in their lives. Or one exposed didn't have anybody to actually uh, uh, fill in the gap where things fell short. I looked at moms who was raising sons out of a broken relationship, who was going to church and praising God all day long, but the church didn't give them the help that they needed. And now this mom is where, what did I go wrong that my son is getting ready to he have a needle in his arm or sit in an electric chair or the gas chamber. And I'm telling these stories and I'm writing these stories and I'm trying to explain to a jury how this family got off track, the years of abuse or incest and what it boiled down to is that we're not exposed to different avenues of help because it's just not present or prevalent in our communities. So we have to introduce our community to something different and find resources and be a help one to another. And so my mission is, which is why I'm here and doing this with you guys, is finding ways to expose our family, our children, single parents, uh, to form relationships. One of the things that my nonprofit that I'm trying to put together is when a young man has a daddy that's doing life, and everybody's saying, "You what? You're just like your daddy." Look at little Charles, Big Charles locked up. Boy, you just like your daddy. And he goes off and he wants to be like Big Charles. But I want to have the opportunity to have Big Charles to tell little Charles, son, you can do something different. You can be something different. Okay, from the jailhouse, creating an avenue where he can talk to his son from the jailhouse, form a relationship, and even though he didn't get it right, I'm asking him, save your son, give him a different option. Again, exposure, doing something different. And so, man, everybody's broken in our community, broken on jobs, uh, broken from their parents being dropped. And so it's just a continuation of it's a cycle of no exposure and disappointment and brokenness. But the question is not about being broken. It's getting to the point where we start looking for the answers. How do we fix it? How do we expose our children who don't have a solid foundation at home? Because sometimes what happens when a family is broken, when a mom or dad is broken? When they're broken, they're going to find ways of escape, which is normally going to be what? Drinking, drugs, themselves, on top of trying to survive. And some of them just give up, just like this mom always did. The good thing is she stayed the course and worked hard in spite of her failures, her shortcomings. But with some people, when they're broken, just throw their hands up. And they do tell the children, figure it out. I had to figure it out. Again, I didn't have anybody to tell me when to go to bed. I made one day I tell you the many mistakes I made, trying to navigate my way through 12, 13 years old, you know. But man, my life now, and I got emotional with Joshua and them just talking about it because, you know, my life now compared to what it should have been, totally different. Totally different.
Yeah, that's good, Mackie. It sounds like you have a powerful story to tell, man. That is real good, what you shared. And I can tell, even though this is your first time being on the call, you add a lot of value to what we're trying to do here with the organization. A lot of value. Your background, your willingness to be transparent and talk about your childhood adds a lot of value. All right. Do we have anybody else who want to share anything? Obviously, we after the hour, but it's only because people are enjoying themselves, I can tell. So do anybody else want to share anything about what?
Well, BJ, I share this. So my kids are a product of divorce. So in that, going through separation and going through divorce from their mother, I had to make a conscious decision as a man, and I would tell other men this that go through divorce or broken relationships if they're not married, is what will you, I had to ask myself every day, I tell myself every day, what will you allow your children to hear and see?
Mm.
And I made a commitment that my son will never hear me talk about his mom, and he will see me active in every aspect of their life. So I'm a young man, and no little boy wants to hear nobody talk about their mama. I don't care how bad mama might have been or how bad daddy may think. No little boy want to hear nobody talk about their mama. So out of respect, even though he was young for my son, I never did that to him. Until today, to this, he's 22 now, but he appreciates that because we have different, now we have grown conversations. So he appreciated the fact that he never heard me say anything negative. So my job was, even they might have been in a negative situation, was to make sure that something positive was injected in every aspect of their life. Now, and then when he got older, he realized some things, and he became angry because then he felt that his mom did some things that messed his life up, that his life should have been like this instead of like that. So then, biblically speaking, I had to go to him about honoring his mother and his father. And so I had to make sure he understood that regardless, the Bible doesn't say honor them just because they did everything right. It's honoring them because that's what the word says,
Mm.
and honoring them so your days can be long. And consistently telling him that changed his whole aspect. And my goal was, I never wanted them to hate marriage. So I needed them to see healthy relationships, even though it might not have been with their mom, but to see something healthy. And that's the thing, is to make sure we make a commitment as men, as leaders, to want our children to see something healthy, what it looks like. I know we talked about the Hustables, and we talked about, I used to love Good Times, all that, when James was in the house. But and so I knew I did something right when my son and my daughter, they talk about being married, because it was big. So a lot of children of divorce hate relationships, hate marriages, and so that brokenness continues. So I would say, and to sum it up, is, as I tell fathers, I tell men, what will you allow your children to hear and see? And you got to make a commitment that they see and hear everything that's positive. And in due time, conversations can be had. But as men, don't talk about the little boy and mom, no matter what. Because nobody, I was young, all of us men on here, you don't want nobody talking about your mom. So I just wanted to add that little bit.
Amen.
Yeah, thank you for that, Pastor Jimmy. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as we notice in the story, Sam, mother and father, they would talk about the other parent to the children.
Right.
You know? And that kind of goes in line with what you just stated, Brother Jimmy, on what not to do. And it also kind of piggybacking what Brother Mackey said as well. Kids need to see positive things in life. You know, what kids see and what kids hear ultimately makes them who they are, who they grow up to be, who they turn out to be, right? And not just kids, but also adults. A lot of adults, they don't realize that the things you see, the things you hear has an impact on you. And that's the reason why, we should try to monitor what we see and what we hear, make sure we're not engaging in anything that's contrary to our moral compass, moral value, because garbage in, garbage out. What you put in is what's going to come out. I'm gonna be totally transparent with you and tell you the reason I have confidence in speaking is because I know what I entertain. You know, it's real easy for something positive to come out of your mouth if all you're doing is taking in positive things. But if you are constantly taking in all kind of negative things, whether that's with your eyes or whether that's with your ears, you really don't know what's going to come out of your mouth because you got different things. You got some positive, you got some negative, and sometimes you don't really know which way to go. But if all you consuming is things that edifies, things that build up, things that encourage, things that motivate, it's going to give you confidence that when you get up to speak, nothing but good things, nothing but good fruit is going to flow out of your mouth. And I want to encourage the kids with that because I know kids, they think that they can watch any kind of thing and it's not going to affect them. Right now, social media is destroying the lives of our youth right now, and we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that. And that's the reason why a lot of these kids are acting out because they see things, seeing people kill each other, shoot up one another on video games, and hearing the rap music telling you that this woman is a B, this woman is a H. They are hearing people on rap songs talk about killing one another. and they're acting it out in the streets because kids don't know any better. That's the reason why God gave every kid who comes into this world two parents to guide, to lead, to instruct, and to fill so that they can be productive in society. Right. Do we have anybody else, real brief? Maybe one other person. And after that, we're going to go ahead on and say a quick prayer and we're going to wrap it up. While we wait for anybody else who want to chime in, I want to ask the question, did you guys enjoy the story? Did you guys enjoy the call today?
Good job, babe. It was great.
Yes. Yeah, I think today's call was very informative. Uh, as far as what you said, what Pastor Jimmy said, even what Mackie spoke on. A lot of times we look at a diet as something that you eat, but it's also what you ingest and what you see in your visual. So when they tell you to guard your diet, that's exactly what he's talking about. So anything you put into your body, whether it's spiritual, physical, or of essence food, like these things are imputed to your soul. So always guard your diet.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good, Coach. Yeah, you're right. You're right. We have to be mindful what we take in. Right. Avery, did you share anything? I think you did earlier. Tyron, did you share anything? Do you want to share anything about the story? Like what you enjoyed about the story or what you thought about what
Uh,
Mackie said or Pastor Jimmy or Sherman or anybody? Do you want to share anything?
um, I don't really have anything else to share.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because this is important because obviously the mission of the organization is to educate the youth. So let me ask you this. What did you learn from the story? What did you learn from what you heard today?
Uh, so like I learned that like it's important to have a father figure in your life or someone that could honestly like protect you from like the outside world or like to make sure that you don't get into stuff that you're not supposed to be in. It's just like it's important to thinking. So like it's basically like important to be like to do what you need to do in life, not things that's not needed.
That's good. Good job, Tyron. Hunter, what did you learn from the call and what you heard today? Whether it's the story, whether it's what was said by any of the people on the call, I want to know what you learned today.
I learned how the three brothers. I mean, like the kid named Mike. Um, I learned how him and what's the little kid name? I mean, what's the main character's name? I
Sam,
forgot. Yeah,
Sam.
Sam. Sam and Mike, like he found out that Mike's dad had died, and it kind of I felt like it kind of broke their relationship a little bit because uh they were like close, but now he's like Mike he's like killing people, and now he's having sentences and all that. So I feel like him losing his father and all the problems that they had to go through was is departing their relationship.
I have something to say.
Okay.
Um, so today, what I learned from the call was about Mike's somebody in his family, his dad, he died, and he didn't like that, so he did some bad things, but we can always forgive people for what they have done, and so Mike's lawyer forgave him for what he did, and I think that was really inspiring.
Okay. Okay. All right. So once again, man, I appreciate everybody being on the call today. One thing I recognize is that you don't have to be here. You can be anywhere in the world right now, but you're here on this call, and I value that. I value everybody on this call. Brother Mackey, I know this is your first time being on a call with us, but as you can see, there's a lot of value here. We're not a regular organization. We are an organization that's just as good as any other organization out there. I stand by that because of the men, positive, strong, black, influential men that are on these calls, the strong, black, influential women that are on these calls. That's what these kids need to see.
Amen.
These are the people they need to hear. Kind of going back to what you shared, Brother Mackey, is that imagery matters. Look at the environment that these kids are in right now, that you have positive fathers that are speaking into these kids' lives and telling them about their experience and telling them about their story. In addition to that, you also have these positive women, strong women that are sharing their story. That is changing the lives of these kids. I can promise you that.
I can see it. I can see it. And I can see the benefit, even myself, just hearing the different experiences from the different people on the call and perspectives. It's always good to get a diverse experience. A lot of times we go through similar experiences or the same thing, but people have different responses. And I appreciate, and I learn from it. And so I appreciate everybody also. And I appreciate you guys even allowing me to be a part of your group. Um, Man, I'm super excited. I can see uh, the impact that Impact 365 is having, could have, and gonna have. Um, and I look forward to the growth and the experience, um, and even being enlightened myself. Um, I love what um, I guess I got something from everybody. Mr. Sherman, um, Brother Larry, Joshua. It's just iron sharpen iron, and so I'm really loving. This is my first one. I'm really loving it. I love it already. I can't wait for the next one.
I appreciate those kind words, man. So now you are a part of our text group. You can always share that link with anyone who you think would be a good fit for the organization, or if you just think it's somebody who would benefit from hearing these conversations. You're welcome to have them on the call. You're a part of our group now, so you're free to do that.
I mean, thank you.
All right, so let's pray. Let everybody go enjoy this Saturday. I can tell by this conversation, man, you guys really enjoyed what y'all heard today. One thing I do want to share is that there is a response. Just like George, father had a response to everything he said. Sam's father had a response to the comments he made as well. So what we can do is next Saturday, we can go over the father's response, because obviously, like we talked about in the past on other calls, is that the father has a side. A lot of times when people go their separate ways, you hear one side of the story. I've shared before that I still don't know why my mother and my father are not together. I don't know the other side. I heard what my mama had to say, but I never had that conversation with my father. And I think that, as I shared before, I think in a lot of ways I didn't want to know. But in this book, what's so good is that you have the father's response. He has something to say about everything that Sam said about him. And a lot of times when you hear the other side of the story, you don't necessarily excuse the behavior, but you understand things a lot better. Okay, so we can go through that response. Just let me think about it. I'm gonna go back and revisit his response, and if it's noteworthy to share on the call, we may have our next Saturday call on the father's response, and we'll be able to have conversation on that. All right. So let's pray. Let's get out of here. Heavenly Father, we thank you, God, for giving us this privilege and opportunity, Lord, to come before you today, Lord, with another call. Lord, I thank you for everybody who was on the call today. Lord, I thank you for every word that was shared, every seed that was sown, Lord. I pray in Jesus' name that these kids, God, will grow as a result of what they heard today, that they will grow into leaders, that they will grow to be strong foundational people in their communities, Lord. God, that they would know what to get involved in and what not to get involved in. Lord, that they would know what friends to connect with and what people not to connect with. I pray, God, that the fathers and the mothers on this call, Lord, I pray that you would help us to raise up these children, Lord. God, we don't know, God, but you know, God, we serve you, God, that you can help us to understand on how to be involved in our kids' lives and how to impact their lives and touch their lives. God, we need your help. God, continue to be with us, and I know you will. Your word says that you'll never leave us. You'll never forsake us, but you'll always be with us. So, God, I thank you for this call, and I thank you, Lord, for helping me to have this call, oh God, and share something with the people, God, that they can understand. I thank you for helping me on today. God, I couldn't have done it without you. God, I honor you, and I thank you, and I praise your name. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Right,
Amen.
right. That's a wrap. That's a wrap.
Amen.
Yeah. Love y'all, man. Love y'all. See y'all up
All right.
next.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate y'all.
All right.